Hello and welcome to Career in Economics. Today we are going to start risk and uncertainty. Here our main concern is to construct a proper utility function because we are in a state space situation. Okay, we are in a state space situation, something that was not there in the standard consumer behavior. So we will start with what is a fair gamble, then we'll move on to St. Petersburg Paradox, which will lead to the VNM expected utility function, and then we'll move to something called attitudes towards risk. We will devise some measure and we'll define who is a risk averse, who is a risk lover, and who is risk neutral. From there we will go to the most important and last section of this topic, which is the insurance. We will talk about fair premium, why and how a risk averse person chooses an insurance, and what kind of premium he or she will be willing to pay. Okay, so let's start. We'll start with fair gamble or fair game. All right, we will use three terms interchangeably, I think. One is game, which I will use less. More than that, it will be gamble. And then there is a term which is called lottery. Okay, it's like in consumer behavior, we talked about goods, we traded in goods, we talked about their prices, buying them, and so on. In here, instead of them, we will talk about lottery. Now, before we start to work in uncertainty, you need to know a little bit of statistics. So you need to know what is an expected value is, you need to know what a variance is, okay, and a brief knowledge of some probability distribution, like normal, Poisson, binomial. Okay, these three, they are essential. So let's start with fair gamble. Okay, so fair gamble is a gamble with expected gain 0. Okay, so consider an example. Flip a coin, all right, with your friend. If head occurs, you get plus $1. If tail occurs, you give $1, so minus $1. And let's say the probability of occurrence of a head is half, which is equal to the probability of occurrence of a tail. So we are in a fair coin. So this coin is also fair, right? Now, if I calculate the expected gain from this, okay, it's expectation x, then this will be half into plus 1 plus half into minus 1, which will lead to 0. So this game, that is flipping a coin with your friend for $1, sometimes I call it, it's a fair game. Alright, so the natural question is, what is an unfair game or unfair gamble? So let us make this gamble a little unfair. Keep the same thing, flip a coin, right? Head occurs, you get $10, tail occurs, you give only $1. So this game is biased towards head. Now the probability remains the same, so the coin is fair, right? We can actually have an unfair coin to adjust these gains, but let's not go into that. So now if I have expectation x, then this will be half into 10 plus half into minus 1, which will lead to $4.5. Definitely this is not 0, so this becomes an unfair gamble. Now, how to make this unfair gamble a fair gamble? Not by changing the rewards. We can make it fair by including something called an entry fee. Okay, so let's make the entry fee as $4.5. So in that case, your expectation x will be your expected gain minus your entry fee. So it will eventually become 0, as you can see. So that is how we can make an unfair gamble a fair gamble by introducing an entry fee. Okay. Keeping in mind what we just studied, let's talk about St. Petersburg Paradox. So what is the game? What is the gamble? So the gamble is like this: a coin is flipped. A coin is flipped until a head appears. If a head appears in the nth flip, the reward is 2 to the power n dollar. Okay, so this is what is being done, and this is the reward system. Now, again, assuming that it's a fair coin, okay, assuming that it's a fair coin. So, if the reward in general is xi, then what will be the value? So, x1 will be 2, x2 will be 4, so on and so forth, and by that xn will be 2 to the power n. Alright? And what will be the associated probabilities? So, associated probabilities. So, P1 will be half, P2 will be 1 by 4, and Pn will be 1 by 2 to the power n. So, if I go for the expected value, then it will be a sum of 1s, right, up to n. So, if we speak in general, in an actual gamble, when we do not know that in the nth flip, head will actually occur, okay, then our expected x actually goes up to infinity. So that means, to make this game fair, the entry fee must be infinite, which essentially means as big as possible. But this is not the reality. I mean, in reality, what happens is that if you ask people, if we invite them actually to play this game, then they will not be ready to pay, not more than a few dollars. Okay, they will not be ready. So that's the paradox. That your mathematical calculation says something else, and in reality, you have something else, right? So, what is happening? So, is it the fact that people are simply irrational, or we are sort of mismeasuring people's valuation? Okay, because that can also happen. So in here, we will first try the Bernoulli solution, and the Bernoulli solution is the very simplest one. That is, people do not directly value money, rather they value the utility that is associated with the money. Okay, so let us look into Bernoulli solution. Consider a utility function, which is obviously a function of W. W stands for wealth. Okay, and Bernoulli says that assume U dash W to be decreasing. That is, as wealth increases, the marginal utility derived from wealth reduces, which is pretty simple. Right? So, an example would be something like this: UW is equal to natural log of W, which satisfies the fact that U dash W is positive, but it is decreasing. That is, the second order is negative. So in that case, our expected utility will be something like sum over pi into u of xi. I runs from 1 to infinity, which, if we carry on, It will be sum over I runs from 1 to infinity. So probability is 1 by 2 to the power I, and now utility is log of instead of W, so it will be 2i. So 2i is this is our reward, right? So that's our this is our reward. Our utility is natural log of that, so we have taken that, and this. So this expression, the expectation, we have taken the probability. Now if you go for this, it will become 1.39. You can calculate it if you want. Okay, so the expected utility is basically this. So a person will be willing to pay that much money as an entry fee, which in utility terms will be equal to 1.39. So if you do that, if you go that way, then the willingness to pay is approximately $4. Okay. You may think that the paradox is gone, but it's not. Bringing in the paradox is very simple. You just have to change the reward. So set a new reward and let that new reward be, so our xi be e to the power 2 to the power I. Okay. Earlier we have taken 2 to the power I. This time, let's say it is our gamble after all, we define it e to the power 2 to the power I. Okay. So if we define that, then u of xi becomes 2 to the power I, and we are back to the same problem, that is expected utility goes to infinite. So is this paradox unsolvable? What it basically tells us, and that's the one result or learning that we can have from here, is that as long as there is no upper bound, to the utility function, the paradox can be regenerated. The paradox can be regenerated by redefining the reward, as we have just done. So that means we did something new, and that leads to the expected utility theory, which requires the definition of lottery. Expected utility theory. And here our commodities, like in any model of consumer behavior, are lotteries. So before we even start, let us write definition of a simple lottery. Definition of a simple lottery. So a simple lottery L is a list L equal to P1, P2, Pn with P small n greater than or equal to 0 for all n runs from 1 to capital N, and sum over Pn equal to 1. So basically these are probabilities of certain state occurrence. Okay, so let me just write it even for clarification, that P1 is probability of occurrence of outcome n. Okay, let's talk like that. Now we will move on to something called a compound lottery. The difference is pretty simple. In a simple lottery, the outcomes n. This is certain that if nth state occur, then outcome n will occur, but the state itself occurs with some probability. A compound lottery is something where the outcome themselves are lotteries. Okay? So, given k simple lotteries, Lk, this is small k, so Lk is equal to P1k, P2k, Pnk, where k runs from 1 to capital K, right? So this basically symbolizes this is the number of lotteries you have here, okay? And probabilities alpha k greater than equal to 0. So since here the outcome themselves are lotteries, so alpha k is the probability of occurrence of the kth lottery, okay? And if the kth lottery occurs, then the associated probabilities will be these numbers, okay, with sum over alpha k equal to 1. So given this structure of simple lotteries, the compound lottery L1, L2, Lk, semicolon, the probabilities alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha k is the risky alternative, that yields simple lottery Lk with probability alpha k. Alright. So basically the idea is that if I am going to have a reduced form of simple lottery derived from this compound lottery, then I have to calculate the compound probability instead of this one. So that's why we give the name compound lottery. So the compound lottery, the name is associated with compound probabilities, nothing more than that. So the corresponding simple lottery, that is reduced version of it, okay, is L equal to P1, P2, comma, Pn is that which generates the same ultimate distribution over outcomes. Okay. So the probability of outcome n in a compound lottery, that is Pn, is Pn in the reduced lottery is Pn equal to, so the nth outcome can occur as a part of lotteries 1 to k. That is, in k simple lotteries, there are certain probabilities of the occurrence of outcome n. Now, these lotteries, simple lotteries themselves, has got a probability of occurrence in the compound lottery. So, if we consider all of that, then the probability of outcome of n is alpha 1, that is this lottery, into Pn1. So this lottery occurs, first lottery occurs, and then within that lottery nth outcome occurs. Okay, and we sum. Right, so alpha 2 Pn2 plus dot 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 plus alpha k into Pnk. Okay, all right. So if we add the idea of consumer behavior now, in our system, consumer behavior stands for, so we look for consumers' preferences over lotteries. Okay? Axioms of preference relation. They will look slightly different. So number one, it is rational, on script L. Script L is the space of lotteries. So our preference relation is rational, that is complete and transitive. Number two, it is continuous, that is, in here we do not have lexicographic preferences, so no lexicographic nature. Okay. And number three, which is the most important, independence of irrelevant alternatives. Of irrelevant alternatives, otherwise known as IIA. This is the most famous among all these axioms. What it stands for is that the preference relation are defined on script L, that is this L, satisfies this axiom if for all L, L dash, L double dash belonging to script L and alpha belonging to open 0, 1, we have, L referred to L dash if and only if alpha L plus 1 minus alpha L dash L double dash are alpha L dash plus 1 minus alpha L double dash. Okay. So basically the preference remains unchanged if we create the same identical convex combination with another lottery. So L dash is taken and made a convex combination with the same convex combination with both L and L dash, and we are claiming that if such a thing is done, then the original preference relation remains. Okay. So now we are in a position where you can talk about expected utility function. So expected utility function is basically is a property that is satisfied by a certain class of utility function. So do not think that every utility function is amenable to this idea. Okay, you may have a question regarding whether such and such utility function is an expected utility function or not, which means that it will satisfy the property that I am going to write. Okay. So definition of expected utility property or form, whatever. So the utility function U, which goes from script L to R, has an expected utility form if there is an assignment of numbers u1, u2 un to the n outcomes that we are talking about, such that for every simple lottery L equal to P1, P2 Pn belonging to script L, we have U of L equal to P1 U1 plus P2 U2 plus Pn Un. So basically you take the expectation where the associated probabilities are given by the lottery, and with the outcome you associate utility numbers. Okay, but the numbers are such that such a kind of calculation is possible. Okay, so the function has to be like that. Utility function with the expected utility form is called VNM, that is von Neumann-Morgenstern VNM utility function. Okay, so John von Neumann and Oscar Morgenstern, from those two names, VNM utility function. Even if you open the original literature, you will see that the only issue that we have currently here is that these numbers, they're cardinal numbers. Okay, and there is a long reasoning or justification, whatever you might choose to say, regarding why these cardinal numbers will work. But that's not the point. The point is that our model will not be complete only with this idea, precisely because remember the consumer behavior we studied. There we said that all these utility functions, they are producing ordinal numbers, so ordinal utility functions, and this is not an ordinal utility function. These numbers are cardinal. Okay, so we complete this literature and then we move on to a setup which kind of builds an ordinal setup based on these cardinal numbers. Okay. So alternatively, a utility function has the expected utility form if and only if u of sum over small k runs from 1 to capital K, alpha k, Lk, so the expectation within the utility box is equal to sum over k runs from 1 to capital K, alpha k into u of Lk. Okay, so that is what we wrote here. We just write it for k lotteries. So for any k lotteries, Lk belonging to script L, small k runs from 1 to capital K, alpha k, since they are probabilities, so greater than or equal to 0, and sum over alpha k is equal to 1. So they are basically probabilities. Okay. Now let us take an example. If a consumer with utility function satisfy expected utility property, tosses a fair coin, then the utility of that lottery, okay, because this lottery itself is the commodity, not the head and tail themselves, but the lottery. Okay, that is our starting point. The head and tail are part of this lottery. Okay, so the utility of that lottery is u of L, okay, which is, let's say, coin toss, is equal to, if it satisfies this property of expected utility, then the expectation, half of utility if H occurs and half of utility of tail occurs. Okay. Alright, so in solving a problem, how do you approach it? That is, if the consumer starts with wealth W, and if head gives plus $1 and tail takes away $1, that is minus 1, right? Takes away $1, then okay, so gives $1, takes $1, that's better. Okay, then u of this lottery is half of the utility after you make the gain plus half into utility of after you make the loss, right? Now there are two very important things to note here so that you do not make a mistake while solving problems of uncertainty. Number one is that the calculation is always based on the resulting wealth. Okay, so the calculation is always based on the resulting wealth. We have not written utility of 1 plus 1 and utility of minus 1. We have written the resulting wealth, W plus 1, W minus 1. And the second thing is that we have indeed did something new, because half of UW plus 1 plus half of UW minus 1, this does not equal half of W plus 1 plus half of W minus 1. These two are not same. Okay? These two are not same. Always remember that. Because if these are same, that means I have said UW equal to W. I have not said anything like that. Alright? So, the expected utility theory takes us to this point. Now, the specific form of the utility function, that is UW, which is unknown to us, this specific form will only give us the numerical value. Okay? So, in the next section, we will move to that, and that will give us the attitudes toward risk of different people. Now, we are in a position to construct our model of behavior under risk. So till this point, what we have done is the background that we need to have our ordinal utility theory. What is the central assumption which was not there when we did consumer behavior? The central assumption is references satisfy VNM expected utility property. So you only choose those utility functions which works with this. So U of script L, and if this space of lotteries contain only L and L dash, then this will be equal to beta into U of L plus 1 minus beta into U of L dash, provided that L and L dash are the only two members. Okay, and this is known as expected utility of a lottery. So let me write EU here. Okay, so that we do not get confused later. Where L is not equal to L dash and beta belongs to 0, 1. So in summary, we can list the axioms as: number one is a utility function assigns ordinal ranking over lotteries. Okay, over lotteries. So this ordinal ranking comes from consumer behavior. Number two is all VNM axioms, types of risk aversion, let's say. Consider the following utility functions. Number one is u of w is equal to w, u1 of w, let's say. Number two is u2 of w is equal to w squared, and number three is u3 of w, so that is natural log of w. Okay, so we are, okay, let's take it square root, make it easier. So square root of w, that is w to the power half. So we are going to understand the types of risk aversions through examples, and we have taken these three so that our understanding becomes easier. Okay. W, UW. So if it is U1W, then it is basically this one. Right? So U1W equal to, okay. Then W square. So this will go like this. And then square root of that. Okay. So how do they create the difference? Consider a lottery which has a 50-50 chance of winning, say rupees 2 or 0. Okay. Now, to evaluate preferences, three components are needed. So if you ever face a question of whether somebody will accept an insurance or not, or that is go for an insurance or not, okay, for that you need to actually evaluate the preferences, and for that you need, number one, expected utility of the gamble or the lottery. Number two, utility of the expected wealth of the gamble. And number three, which is something new, certainty equivalent. So there are questions which actually asks you to find the certainty equivalent corresponding to a gamble for a specific consumer. Okay. Now let us consider these three preferences and this lottery and evaluate these things. Okay. So our first job is the expected utility of the lottery, and that for person 1, EU1 of L is equal to half of U2 plus half of U0, which equals to 1. Then person 2, I understand how you do it. So expectedly U2 of L is equal to half of, so it was W squared, right? So U of 2, okay, U1, 2, half of U2, 0. So that will be half into 2 squared, 4, and this will be 0, so 2. Then for person 3, EU3 of L, similarly if you calculate, take the square, so on and so forth, it will become approximately 0.71. Okay, so for the people, or the persons, if we write 1, 2 and 3 here, okay, then the numbers of expected utility of L, they are 1, 2 and 0.71. Now the second component is expected wealth and its utility. Okay. So what is the expected wealth of the gamble? Be equal to half into, so if you gain 2 plus half into 0, which is 1. So what is the utility of expected wealth for the first guy? 1. For the second guy? 1, because 1 squared is 1. And as you can see, also for the third guy. So if we go for utility of expected wealth, 1, 1 and 1. And then comes CE, that is certainty equivalent. Calculating this requires the definition because it's new. So definition of certainty equivalent. Definition of certainty equivalent. It is the amount of money that the consumer would be willing to accept with certainty instead of facing lottery L. So people are faced with the lottery, then you come up with some money, you offer the people, say that if you accept this money, you don't have to play the lottery or the gamble. Okay? And if that person accepts that money, then we are talking about certainty equivalent. Okay? And if he or she doesn't accept, that means we are talking about a value which is lower than the certainty equivalent. Okay. So we have the value of expected utility of playing the lottery. So that means if these three guys, if they go and play the lottery, then the first guy will come up with an expected utility of 1. Alright? So the certainty equivalent CE of the first person is that amount of money which will generate the same utility. So that means certainty equivalent for the first person for the lottery will be that amount of money in certain which will generate the amount of utility 1. So basically U1 inverse, right? So that means this is 1. And certainty equivalent is a monetary amount. So this is rupee 1. So these two are utility numbers, but this here is a monetary amount. Okay? That's a very important difference. For the second individual, the utility that he or she will obtain from the lottery is 2. So U2 inverse of 2, and that will be 1.414. For the third person, C3 of L is U3 inverse of 0.71. So that will be 0.51. 1.414 and 0.51. So that means if you offer ₹1 to person 1, he will accept that money and go away, that I will not play the lottery. Second guy, if you offer 1.414, he will accept this certainty equivalent, that is this money, and do not play the lottery. For the third guy, if you offer 0.51 rupees, he or she will reject the lottery and go home. Okay. Now, as you can see, that certainty equivalent is same for person 1, basically lower for person 2, and lower for person 3. But utility, if you compare with utility of expected wealth, then for person 1 is the same, for person 2 certainty equivalent is higher, and for person 3 certainty equivalent is lower. Alright? So person 1 is risk neutral. How do we define it? As certainty equivalent is equal to utility of expected wealth, right? And person 2 is risk lover, as certainty equivalent is greater than utility of expected wealth. And for person 3 is risk averse, as certainty equivalent is less than utility of expected wealth. Now, there is a catch. The catch is that in this comparison, on the right hand side we have utility numbers, on the left hand side we have numerical figures, money amount. So we must sort of change it. So how do you do that? Remember CE certainty equivalent? In that we essentially calculated U inverse of expected utility of lotteries, which basically tells us that U of CE is equal to expected utility of lotteries. So that's how we create the comparison. Okay. Alternatively, so if you are asked a quick question, preferences over risk is also derived from concavity or convexity of the utility function. So we have two things. One is expected utility and the other is utility of expected wealth, right? So now, using Jensen's inequality again from statistics, what we have is, for the first one, expected utility of wealth is equal to utility of expected wealth, and Jensen's inequality tells us that this is a linear utility function. So linear utility function, and that means, as we defined, a risk neutral. For the second one, expected utility of wealth is greater than utility of expected wealth. This implies convex utility function, that is risk lover, and the last one less than utility of expected wealth, so concave utility function, and this implies risk averse. So that means without knowing about the offered gamble, associated probabilities, so on and so forth, we can actually talk about the attitude towards risk or the preferences just by knowing the curvature of the utility function. And based on this idea, measures of attitude towards risk has been developed, and we will talk about that in a moment. Measurements of risk aversion. First is absolute risk aversion. So the quantitative measure, this measure is known as Arrow-Pratt Coefficient. Arrow-Pratt Coefficient. It is defined as let's say RW is equal to minus of U double dash W divided by U dash W. As you have seen already, that the curvature sort of gives you the signal of risk, attitude towards risk. So with risk averse individuals, having diminishing mu, diminishing marginal utility, RW is positive. One important result, this measure remains unchanged with respect to linear transformations of the utility functions. Constant absolute risk aversion, otherwise known as CARA, CARA. So consider U of W equal to e to the power minus AW, A being positive. Now RW is equal to, so double dash, single dash, A square into e to the power minus AW divided by A, so on and so forth, equal to A positive, which is a constant. So this function, and as we say, a linear transformation of this function exhibits constant absolute risk aversion. RW remains unchanged at all levels of wealth. In terms of economics, that's what it says. And from that point, it becomes slightly problematic as the level of wealth has a little bit of connection with the ability to take risk as we can normally think of. So that leads us to relative risk aversion. The willingness to pay to avoid a gamble is in general related to individual's wealth. Obviously, there are exceptions. One is we studied, and another we will study. Consider E of W equal to A plus BW plus CW square, with B positive and C negative. The Arrow-Pratt coefficient is RW. So just going to calculate directly 2C divided by, there is a minus, right? B plus 2CW. Okay. With DRW DW positive, which basically means that as the wealth level increases, RW, that is your risk coefficient, it also increases, your ability increases. So that is risk aversion increases as wealth increases. Okay? So basically, you are more being, your willingness to pay to avoid increases. That means your risk aversion increases. But that also means that this risk aversion is connected to the initial wealth that we talked about. So the measure of relative risk aversion. That's why this is generated. And it's very simple. RRW is W into R into W. So you get Arrow-Pratt coefficient, multiply with the W, you get the relative risk aversion. So minus W into U double dash W divided by U dash W. This is the thing. You connect it to the level of wealth. The way we have talked about constant absolute risk aversion and the specific utility function and its linear transformations, here also we have constant relative risk aversion. So CRRA. Consider U of W equal to W to the power 1 minus A divided by 1 minus A not equal to 1. And if you simply calculate RRW, you will see that the value of that coefficient is becoming A. Okay. Let's without restriction, so not equal to 1. Hence, such a utility function and its linear transformations exhibit CRRA. So now we are going to look at the problem of insurance, how to choose one. And we have written risk aversion and insurance. It is because we are interested primarily in risk averse persons. Why? Because only for them the idea of mitigation of risks exists. Okay. So for a risk averse consumer, as we know that this holds true, that expected utility of wealth is strictly less than utility of expected wealth. The gap between these two will be exploited by the insurance company for premium. That is the basic idea. The utility function that we will have for a risk averse satisfies diminishing marginal utility. Okay. So we are going to look at a diagram in the end, but first we are going to look at a solved problem. Okay. So consider an individual. Current wealth is rupees 1 lakh. Okay. And there is a gamble or a prospect. It goes like this. There is a 25% chance of losing rupees 20,000. Say the loss of a car due to theft. Okay. Next year. Okay. So the individual who is risk averse has got a car, and there is a 25% chance, that is probability 1/4, that it will be stolen, and the loss will be of rupees 20,000. Otherwise, it will remain the same. Okay. Now, also, just as an example, we will consider the utility function to be log W, natural log of wealth. Okay, the question that we are going to ask is, what is the maximum premium that the person is willing to pay? So that is our question that we are going to answer last. To start with, the person will go for insurance, that we know. Now, the problem solving is very simple. Our job is compare utility between two scenarios, between with insurance and without insurance. Okay. So you're going to first start with without insurance. So without insurance, expected utility will be, so there is a 1/4 chance of losing 20,000, so U of 80,000 plus 3 by 4 into U of 1 lakh. As we know that calculations are always done on the final amount of wealth. Okay, so if you calculate this, like 1 by 4 log of 80,000 plus 3 by 4 log of 1 lakh, you will see that it will come around 11.45714. Okay, so let's just write it here. No insurance, so it will be 11.45714. Now, what happens if there is an insurance? To start with, if there is an insurance, then there will be a premium. Our question is, what is the maximum premium that the person is willing to pay? But before going into that, we must know what is a fair premium, much like fair game. So what is a fair premium? So fair premium is equal to probability of loss into amount of loss. 1 by 4 into 20,000, which is 5,000. So this is the fair premium of the insurance. Now, say in the with insurance case, this person is paying the fair premium. With insurance, fair premium. So in that case, the expected utility is equal to, when no theft occurs, then the utility will be 1 lakh, and then you pay the premium of 5,000. So minus plus 1 by 4. So you will have a loss of 20,000 in general, normally. So 80,000. Since you have the insurance, the company will pay you back this amount of 20,000. So 20,000 minus you have to pay the premium, so 5,000. So this is the resulting wealth when you have the loss. Then since you have insurance, you are getting repaid the loss and minus the premium that you are paying. So in both the cases, it is basically becoming 95,000. Which means end of the day, U of 95,000. What it says is that these probabilities are gone. That means whether you have the theft or not, your resulting wealth will be 95,000. So you know now for certain that this is the money you are going to end up with. Okay, and that is the exact point of insurance. That is, when you have insurance, the uncertainty of this probabilities 3 by 4 and 1 by 4, they go away. Your expected utility becomes simple utility of the resulting wealth under the insurance, and you are paying the premium. Okay, so what is the utility in that case? Log of 95,000, which is equal to 11.46163 if you calculate it. So as you can see that this number is higher than this number. You may feel that the gap is very small, but remember you have taken log, so even a small gap can mean a huge number in terms of money, right? That means this person who is risk averse will be going for insurance. So since expected utility under insurance is higher than expected utility under no insurance, risk averse person chooses insurance. That's like basic economics. Higher utility, so you go for that choice. Okay. Now, this is not the maximum willingness to pay. This is not the maximum willingness to pay. Okay, so we first make this clear. The individual will be willing to pay more than this 5,000 rupees. Now, how to find that? It's pretty simple. You see, with insurance, the expected utility for that individual is higher, right? So there is still a gap between the utility numbers of no insurance and insurance. The maximum amount will be that X which will make these two equal, right? So whenever someone asks you what is the maximum willingness to pay, it's pretty simple to find. It will be that X, it will be that X. If you subtract it, the resulting expected utility under insurance and expected utility under no insurance, they will be same. So we will do just that. So what is the rule here? The rule is at the maximum premium, at the maximum premium insurance, utility under insurance, because now we know that the expected utility under insurance is basically simple utility. The probability is gone. Is expected utility under no insurance. Okay. Now if we take our example, let the premium be X. So U of 1 lakh minus X, okay, equal to, so you know what the expected utility is. It is 11.45714. So if you solve it, you will see that X becomes 5426. Okay. So as you can see that this is the maximum willingness to pay. That means the person will be willing to pay more than the fair premium. And we know how much that amount is. That amount is rupees 426. So a risk-averse person not only will choose the insurance, but the risk-averse guy will be willing to pay more than the fair premium. So naturally, who is the person who is willing to pay only the fair premium? That is our risk-neutral person. Okay. So one result will be a risk-neutral person will pay only fair premium and avail insurance. So if you charge more than fair premium, the risk neutral guy is gone. And the last result, which is pretty simple, that is a risk lover will not choose insurance. And that is because for the risk lover, there will be no insurance offered by the company. If someone is a risk lover, then imagine this scenario of the risk lover is just the opposite. So if you want a risk lover to choose an insurance, that means the insurance company has to pay a premium to that guy, which is never happening. So basically, a risk lover person will not choose any insurance. Okay? For a risk averse, the utility function is concave in wealth. So we can imagine that this function can safely show a risk averse person's utility. Now, to make this easy, we consider initial wealth, we consider initial wealth, say W naught. So this is our W naught. Now, 50-50 chance of losing or winning, say some amount H. Okay. So we calculate based on the resulting wealth. So say this is W naught plus H, and this here is W naught minus H. Now, if you want to calculate the expected utility, so this is the utility of W naught minus H, and this here is the utility of W naught plus H. So there is a 50-50 chance. What do? We connect these two lines, okay, and we take the midpoint, which is, let's say, somewhere here, okay, and this line will show us that this is the expected utility of W. Alright, this point, let's say this is some I don't know, E2, let's say. Okay. Now the point is that this expected utility is achieved for the risk-averse person according to his utility function at this point. Okay. So at this point, the risk-averse person has got expected utility of W, which he will be getting from playing this gamble. So if I map this, it comes down here, and this here is the certainty equivalent. So as you can see, there is a gap between CE and W naught, right? So W naught minus CE is positive. This is the gap which is exploited by the insurance company, okay? And this gap will also show the willingness to pay the premium, all right? Now, we have talked about the coefficient of risk aversion earlier, and here we are talking about choice of insurance, fair premium, maximum willingness to pay. So the last thing that we have is a connection between the coefficient of risk aversion and the fair premium. Okay. Just to remember, the RW for us was minus U double dash W divided by U dash W. Okay. So what is the result? Consider a fair bet. That is a fair game. Right? So a gamble, a random variable with expectation H equal to 0. Alright. And let small p be the insurance premium. P be the insurance premium. So if someone pays this premium, he or she becomes indifferent between whether we are in the state of losing the object or gaining the object. Here, losing H or gaining H. The result is this. In this case, fair bet, in this case, P is approximately equal to small k into RW, where RW is defined by that, where k is positive. That is, the maximum willingness to pay to avoid a fair bet by a risk-averse person is proportional to her Arrow-Pratt coefficient of risk aversion. Okay, so at this point we end the class on uncertainty. We have started with St. Petersburg Paradox. We constructed the VNM utility function, showed why do we need it. We defined expected utility, calculated it, shown the utility function for three different persons: risk averse, risk neutral, risk lover. We defined their coefficient of risk aversion. Then we moved on to the insurance, and one of the most important topic of UG economics, how to find the maximum willingness to pay for a premium. So here we end the class. Thank you.